Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, August 19th, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the 2020 Senate elections. So I actually haven't made a video about these Senate elections in quite some time now, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Cook Political Report ratings for a number of these races. So we're talking about how the Democratic Party pretty much has the overall better shot at taking the majority now compared to a year ago when that didn't even seem possible. You know, the Republican Party holds 53 seats currently following the 2018 midterm elections, and they entered into this map with numerous advantages over the Democratic Party. I mean, if you apply the 2016 battleground map, the Republican Party, or the 2016 presidential map, the Republican Party comes out on top by the same exact margin. So that is pretty significant. If we're looking at these battleground states, the Cook Political Report gives 45 seats safe for the Democratic Party, only 40 seats safe for the GOP. We've seen a number of states that were previously rated safe, which we're going to go through in just a moment, that have now become likely, possibly lean, or even toss-up. And I'll show you what I mean. So, on your screen right now, you can see states such as Kansas and Alabama and South Carolina. You know, these are traditional Republican states. Alabama is really the only one that should be within contention, given that Doug Jones is a senator, a Democratic senator, incumbent from that state. Both of these should be pretty solid for the GOP. Same thing with Texas and Alaska. There's no reason for these states to be considered likely. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first ratings on November 30th, 2018, and see where they put the GOP versus the Democratic Party. Well, we started off with one likely Democratic seat that has now moved to safe. We also have to realize Michigan moved down from solid down to lean, and Alabama went from lean to lean Republican. So those are all one positive and two negatives for the Democratic Party. When we look at the Republican-held seats, they had no toss-up seats. None. All 6 of the toss-up seats are Republican-held seats. So they went from having none to 6 in 2 years. In the lean Republican column, they had Arizona Senator Martha McSally, which has now been moved to lean for the Democratic Party. That's a flip. Colorado has moved from lean Republican down to toss-up, so has Maine. And also, North Carolina has moved from being likely Republican to toss-up. Georgia, David Perdue went from likely Republican to toss-up. And we're missing one more. Kansas. You know, Kansas went from, actually not one more, sorry, Montana. Kansas went from solid Republican down to lean. So did South Carolina with Lindsey Graham, went down to lean. Went through likely, then went down to lean, possibly could be toss-up by the time we reach the election. Iowa moved down to lean. Montana, Steve Daines went from solid Republican down to toss-up. That largely was due to the fact that there was no real speculation that Steve Bullock was actually going to run. So at the beginning of this year, the map was a little bit more where it is right now. Looking at Doug Jones in Alabama moved from toss-up over to lean Republican. Lean Democrat race remained the same, and then likely Democratic seats moved back into the safe Democratic column. But the Republicans had 3 toss-up seats at the beginning of 2020. January 10th, they had Arizona, Colorado, and Maine as toss-up seats. Kansas open seat as lean, which is where it stands today. North Carolina went from lean down to toss-up today. Georgia, David Perdue went from likely to toss-up. And then Georgia's special election went from likely down to lean. Kentucky, I believe, stayed the same. Mississippi moved over into the safe Republican column, and then Montana remained in the safe Republican column. And what was the reason for that? Why was Montana safe? It's because Steve Bullock was running for president, and he said he would not run for Senate following his presidential election bid, which we all know ended up to be false. He is now running, which is why it went from solid, not even likely, not even lean, down to toss-up. So Montana, Colorado, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, and Maine are all toss-up seats. The Democrats hold on to 47, actually winning over Arizona. It's a flip. The flip for the GOP is the state of Alabama. So with these 6 battleground seats, the Democratic Party is at a very easy pathway to take the majority if Joe Biden wins the election, which it looks like he's on track to do. Because if Joe Biden wins, all they need is 3 out of the 6 battleground seats, a 50% win rate. And they're currently leading, and more than that. Colorado has John Hickenlooper up double digits. Looking at Maine, Sarah Gideon is up 5%. In North Carolina, Cal Cunningham is up 5%. And there you are, majority. And that's not even assuming, Steve Bullock wins in Montana, or Teresa Greenfield in Iowa, or Jon Ossoff in Georgia, which are all viable races for the Democratic Party. New data released from Georgia. Yes, it was a Democratic insider poll, but typically those don't even show the Democrats on top in Georgia. Has Jon Ossoff up 2%. In Iowa, it's been back and forth. Joni Ernst +1, Teresa Greenfield +1. I don't have too much hope for the Democrats there, but it is very much possible. In Montana, There is going to be a Steve elected to the United States Senate. There are the only two people on the ballot now. The Libertarian dropped out, and the Green Party candidate was removed from the ballot. So now it looks like it's going to be Steve versus Steve. Steve Wilk is going to probably do well, but it may not be enough to put him over the top yet. But wouldn't even matter. If Colorado, North Carolina, and Maine go to the Democratic Party, which they are likelier than not going to carry those races as it stands today, they win the majority. And that's just because the vice president breaks the tie. In this sense would be Senator or Vice President Kamala Harris. She would break the tie in the United States Senate. So, the reason why these 6 battleground states are so close from where they were just rated at the beginning of the year. I mean, they went from solid down to toss-up, from likely to toss-up. What was the reason for that? Well, if you take a look at the ratings that have been put out from Cook Political Report, we're seeing a lot more Senate seats that moved that were solid down to likely or lean, which means they will be targeted by the Democratic Party. We look at South Carolina. Somehow, someplace, South Carolina got closer. Jamie Harrison has been running a very strong fundraising campaign, but still in terms of polling data has been behind Lindsey Graham. Despite that, Cook Political Report has rated this as lean for the GOP. Not likely, definitely not safe, despite it being safe right at the beginning of the year. So we're looking at South Carolina. What's so different? I mean, Lindsey Graham in 2008 was called right at poll closing time, despite Obama coming very close in the state of South Carolina and winning the Electoral College with 365 electoral votes. The Democrats hit 59 Senate seats following that election. But South Carolina wasn't competitive. In 2014, same thing. So what's different about 2020? The demographics about the state are pretty much the same. Just increased African-American turnout will likely drive up Democratic vote share in this state pretty significantly. I mean, Donald Trump didn't even carry the state by a safe margin in 2016. It was a 14-point margin of victory, which is nothing to scoff at, but at the same time, he could have done a little bit better, and he's definitely not doing better this time around. So, if Lindsey Graham underperforms Donald Trump's margin by possibly 5-10%, and Joe Biden comes within 6% of the margin, which is very possible with the levels of turnout we're expecting to see on the Democratic side, South Carolina could very well be competitive and not called for hours into the evening. Now, I don't think South Carolina is going to go to Jamie Harrison. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the margin will narrow up, but at the end of the day, I think they will elect a Republican to the Senate. But the fact that it's even remotely competitive means the GOP needs to spend money here. Also in Kansas, what used to be safe now is lean. I mean, looking at Kansas, they're going to have to spend money there too. I mean, it makes no sense. It's a solid Republican state. It's 6 electoral votes, very inconsequential to the overall red wall area. But Kansas has competitive House races, has now a competitive Senate race. The GOP might lose money that they would normally be spending in Colorado because Cory Gardner is practically a lost cause and have to spend it in Kansas. So it's not just here. Alaska. I mean, could you even imagine that Alaska would be competitive in 2020? Not only on the presidential level, not only on the House level, but also on the Senate level. And now Alaska, going back and forth in polling data in terms of Al Gross versus Dan Sullivan, it looks like this race actually could shape up to be closer, and Cook is addressing that. Same thing in Texas. Now, I think a lot of people expected Kentucky to be closer just because Mitch McConnell is so unpopular, but it'll still probably elect a Republican. All 3 of these states likely will, but the GOP needs to ensure that. So they're going to spend money there. One rating that I don't necessarily agree with is Mississippi's safe characterization for the GOP. It's going to be likely. Cindy Hyde-Smith probably won't win by a 15-point margin. If she does, that'll be very surprising considering that she didn't even do well in a special election. And I understand special elections typically narrow down races, but then again, we're seeing levels of turnout that are similar to South Carolina. And Mississippi is actually the state with the largest % black vote share. So keep that in mind. Mississippi could very well be likely. Again, the GOP would have to waste money there. And for Minnesota, and for Virginia and New Mexico and New Hampshire. In a regular election year, if we were having a President Hillary Clinton run for re-election, these 4 states very well could have been toss-ups. But now they're safe. From what was considered lean at one point on my channel to likely, now to safe. All 4 of these, not 4 of these states, all 4 of these states, actually, because New Mexico wasn't always an open seat, but now it's going to be an open seat. Ben Ray Lewin is the Democratic nominee there. All 4 of these seats are now considered to be safe just because the GOP failed to field any good candidates. I mean, Virginia is going to be a 15-point margin. New Hampshire likely will be. Minnesota, Tina Smith, definitely. New Mexico, absolutely. I mean, looking at where the GOP has failed to field good candidates, not only in these safe Democratic seats now, there's a reason why they're safe Democrat, but also in these toss-up seats. I mean, do you really think that Roger Marshall was the best GOP candidate comparable to Chris Kobach? Maybe. But looking at the data that we see now, he's still a bad candidate to run in that race. Still close enough that it's still considered lean following Chris Kobach's loss in the primary there. Looking at the remainder of the states, I mean, there's still some competitive races that very well could have been different. Even if they had primaried Cory Gardner, I think that Republican would probably have a better shot at winning that Senate race than Cory Gardner, just given Cory Gardner's vote history in that state. They could have fielded a much better candidate than Martha McSally, the candidate that voters rejected 2 years prior to this election. Are you kidding me? Really? That's the best you could come up with in Arizona. There are plenty of other Republicans who would have easily won this election if they were just well known in this state. And, they appointed Martha McSally, and it's going to end up with 2 Democratic senators. That's the gift that she gave to Arizona Democrats running in both Senate elections and losing twice. But if we're looking across the Senate maps, I mean, the GOP could have spent their money much better, and also they could have been focusing on these races way earlier because they overestimated these safe races. I mean, now we're starting to see solid GOP states, again, Kansas, South Carolina, Alaska, narrow up. And that redirects funds away from, Michigan, from North Carolina, retaining that seat, from Iowa, from Montana. And if they get very complacent with where they are now, because they currently have a 3-seat majority over the 50 mark, the GOP very well could lose some seats and still retain the majority. But right now, the Democrats are the favorites and the clear favorites, given the battleground states that are competitive and the states that have already been rated for the Democratic Party as either safe, lean, and then based off my estimations, they could very well win Colorado, very well win Maine and North Carolina, and that's it. Game's over. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe to the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. I'm going to be making my DNC recap video later on today, so expect that sometime soon. DNC Night 2. DNC Night 3 is today. We'll be live tweeting on the Twitter as well. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.